This is the pillow talk that completely changed the course of history of a whole country. You see, the pillow talk technique was one of France's deadliest espionage tactic against African leaders and others. And in this scenario, French women were the sleepover spies in charge of the delicate task of extracting juicy information from high profile dignitaries and celebrities. And their methods were irresistible because it worked like a charm all the times. And this is according to a French documentary that was released in 2023 exposing these naughty like PDD's operations. And all these lady spies operated under the leadership of a powerful and notorious woman who was known as Madame Claude. This was a woman who had more connections than the Atlantic Ocean, and she also collaborated with her country's secret service by allowing them to use her staff to infiltrate, influence foreign governments, especially in the African continent. Look, Madame Claude was not afraid of getting her fingers dirty, sticking them in many pies to survive, even if it meant being in bed with her country's biggest enemy at the time. Because the story alleges that she claimed to have joined the French resistance during the Nazi occupation, but other sources suggest that she collaborated with the Germans. Now, this is how she built her influence and fortune. You see, after the war, she relocated to the city of Paris, where she launched a high class brothel offering the services of sophisticated and cultured, beautiful French women she referred to as swans to dignitaries and other influential and powerful people from all over the world, including from the African continent. But we will get to that in a second. But my question is, how do you come out of a war and the first thing in your mind is to start a brothel? Clearly, she must have been very busy during that German occupation because it seems like every tight corner of more than just our country belonged to the Germans, who probably hung their fur coats on their coat stand. Anyways, this madam was a master of manipulation and blackmail, allegedly. Maybe this is probably a skill she developed under the many years of German occupation, but who knows? And it is said that her recruitment process was very strict, but once recruited in her establishment, French women were taught many things such as general knowledge, art, and etiquette. You see, the goal was to transform these ladies into some of the most sophisticated weapons of manipulations ever known to men. And in my opinion, this was a diabolical move because it's like trying to add more venom in a black mamba in the eyes of men who were attracted to the type of woman she was recruiting. And this is how she either blackmailed their client or shared the information collected with her country's authorities. But either way, she made a lot of money in the process. Because as you can imagine, like her clientele quickly grew to include businessmen, actors, and royalties from all around the world. And names like the Shah of Iran, Salvatore Dali, Charles de Gaulle, who's a local, GF Kennedy, Coco Chanel, and more. Now let's recalibrate to the African continent and specifically Chad under the leadership of its first president, Francois Tombalbaye, right after gaining independence from La France. Now, this was a married man whom some people out there may refer to as a Pan Africanist. Side note: nowadays, many people and organizations are mistakenly considered Pan Africanist by those who are not well informed, especially when imperialist countries criticize them. People automatically assume the criticism is because they are doing something good for Africa or they are Pan Africanist, even if imperialist countries, who are not the voice of reasons, may have legitimate reasons for calling them out. Now back to Tombalbaye. Under the guise of returning to African authenticity, he changed his name from Francois to Ngarta and renamed the capital city from Fort Lamy to N'Djamena. I mean, it seems like it was a trend in the 1970 Africa because not too far from Chad, President Mobutu was also running a national authenticity program, which led him to change the name of the country to Zaire and dropping his European name Joseph. But back to Tombalbaye. Look, it seems that when it came to his choice of girlfriend behind closed doors, that's where he drew the line on the National Authenticity Program. Because the story has it, he was played like a guitar and fell victim to this honey trap made in France, which led to his assassination in 1975. You see, the 70s was an era where former colonial powers were busy eliminating any potential seeds of African leaders with the ambitions of working for the betterment of the African continent. And it's in that climate that his relationship with France rapidly deteriorated, probably got sick of the paternalistic attitude of the former colonial power towards his country. But he also wanted to assert his authority in his country. So, in the process, he made one crucial mistake. You see, Ngata began replacing French civil servants with Chadian people, and that didn't sit well with France because they felt like they were losing their grip on Chad. But who cares? After all, colonization was over, so they had to go home. However, the biggest mistake he made was to primarily replace them with people from his own community or ethnicity, if you will, marginalizing other communities in his country. Look, initially he wanted a more independent and nationalistic Chad, aiming to diversify the country's foreign relations by seeking support from the United States, China, Libya, and others. Meanwhile, he accused the French of backing secessionist movements across the African continent and of interfering in African affairs. I mean, it's just crazy how these accusations are still alive and well today. And it's not Burkina Faso, Mali, or Niger who will contradict these statements. However, the Muslim majority in the north of the country felt marginalized by his regime. And on top of that, the opposition in his country kept growing and he became increasingly isolated. You see, President was also confronted with several coup attempts and rebellion from various factions, and some were backed by La France and other countries. You see, in that isolation, his regime became increasingly repressive and authoritarian, and he went as far as banning all political parties except his own. Basically, only his team was allowed to score goals. Listen, at this point, he should have only focused on playing defense because this was a man under all kinds of pressure: international, continental, regional, national, including street pressure. However, in the midst of all that, he still found the time to intimately link up with one of those sophisticated French women, one of Madame Claude's employees. I mean, that meeting should have never happened. It should have never taken place under no kind of circumstances. Listen, where do you find the audacity to play in the river if you know that the oceans is desperately looking for you? Anyways, Mr. President voluntarily slipped up in muddy waters and landed in the caring hands of a well-trained patriotic spy who extracted all kind of juicy information from him using the pillow talk technique. She took him all the way to the seven heaven gates and back, and it is alleged that he told her all his plans of abandoning France and working with other partners, among other confidential informations. Now, after collecting all the confidential details, the patriotic spy shared them with her government, and Paris wasn't aroused or pleased by these revelations. I mean, it has never been a secret that France suffers from an attachment problem, especially when it comes to African countries. For example, you remember in 2023 when the French ambassador barricaded himself in the French embassy in Niamey, Niger, refusing to leave the country after being officially told to leave by the local authorities. Anyways, following that event, coincidentally on April 13, 1975, a rebel group stormed the presidential palace and Garta Tombalbaye was assassinated. You see, while at the highest seat in the country, a hard man fell for flat Nyash. The moral of the story is don't fall for Nyash, stay focused.
We, ni nini?